Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua has stopped Carlos Takam in the 10th round of their fight in Wales to retain the WBA and IBF heavyweight belts. It must be noted the stoppage was somewhat questionable. While Takam had taken some heavy shots, he didn't go down and he was still looking to defend himself. The replay did show he was evading shots as the ref jumped in. And Takam after the fight even said he didn't know why the referee stopped the fight. But apart from the ending, which left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, this was a great fight because of all the drama, all the intrigue. So I'll do a quick recap of the fight, then some thoughts on what it all means, and I'll also give my take on the Helenius White fight at the end. So this fight between Anthony Joshua and Carlos Takam, it started with both men being very cagey, and then there was a head clash between the pair in the second round, and that busted up Anthony Joshua's nose. And this was a big moment in the fight, because for the rest of the round, you could actually see AJ wince when Takam caught him on the nose, even if it wasn't a flush punch. It did seem to give Takam a little, or a measure of confidence, and he sort of was fighting quite well into that third round. But it all turned on its head in the fourth round when a Joshua bomb opened up a nasty cut on Takam's right eye, and this immediately troubled the Frenchman, and Joshua pounced and poured on the pressure, eventually scoring a knockdown. And many of us probably could have been forgiven for thinking, well, it was going to be curtains for Carlos Takam at this point, but he grounded out the round, and his corner tried to stem the bleeding between rounds. And then over the next round or two, while it may have looked like the fight would be stopped because of the cut, Takam fought on, and bravely fought on. I think a lot of us were thinking, well, he's doing quite well here. And he was trying to meet Joshua's pressure, and he even landed a few bombs of his own. And he had some success at times. He did land a few good shots. And he made Joshua feel his power at times. And while Takam was fighting hard, I mean, he was putting up a good show. Joshua was certainly doing enough to rack up most of the rounds. He was landing more frequently and cleanly. I mean, round 6 and 7, they were also competitive, but it did seem to me that Joshua, he seemed content to box Takam for the most part, and he was picking his shots. It did become a little apparent that the pressure, though, was starting to catch up with Joshua from round 6 onward. He looked like he was starting to breathe heavier and heavier. He had been pouring on the pressure, throwing more shots, more active, and it appeared while he was tiring, Takam was actually still in relatively good shape. But even though AJ's output decreased in those rounds, Takam just wasn't doing enough. He wasn't forcing the action enough. He was landing the odd shot that got AJ's attention, but AJ was still winning the rounds. And sort of by the sort of 8th or 9th round, I can't remember which one, AJ opened up another cut on Takam's other eye. And it was certainly seeming like it was going to be a fight that was going to be destined to end early. And not because of a knockout, because both cuts were relatively serious. But in the 10th round, Joshua caught Takam. And he caught him with a few heavy shots. And the Frenchman, he was visibly wobbled. And AJ went in for the kill, throwing a flurry of punches. And while Takam, he was eating a few of these shots, he didn't go down. And he was still trying to evade what was coming at him, and somewhat successfully. He was ducking and weaving, but this was the point that the ref stepped in, and prematurely in my view. I didn't, at the point of the stoppage, yet think that AJ had it in the bag. Sure, it was heading into that territory, but it didn't yet have that sort of inevitable feeling about it. After the fight, Joshua, he was very careful not to criticize the stoppage, the officials, instead saying he would have liked to have seen Takam put to the ground unconscious. And I would note, and you've probably seen some of this yourself, a number of top boxers or former boxers and other people of note, they have also been questioning the stoppage online on social media and such. And don't get me wrong, Joshua, he was in control of this fight. He was coasting to a decision if it had have gone that far. And he was better than Takam on the night. So in terms of the fight though, the takeaways. I mean, first off, full credit to Carlos Takam. He was a much better opponent than many fans were giving him credit for. He showed a good chin, and he did eat some of AJ's best shots early in the fight. He made Joshua work quite hard at times, and clearly part of his strategy was to hang around, not expend too much energy, and take the fight into deeper waters and see where that took him. I mean, there was a brief period where he threw, quite a bit of work. That was in that window just after he took the cut, and it looked like the fight might get stopped. But once that sort of, that threat of the fight getting stopped dissipated, he sort of went back to he was generally conserving himself quite well. And he boxed quite well as well. He made Joshua miss quite a bit at times. He showed a good ticker, and he hung in there for as long as he could. I mean, especially given the cuts, that was quite an impressive effort. He did manage to get Joshua's attention a few times with a few flush shots, but he just couldn't land enough of them. For Joshua, he showed that he's got the technical skill and ability to outbox the top guys in the division, and that it's not just a case of he has to rely on 1 or 2 punches. Sure, that helped end the fight, but his boxing ability and ring craft made sure he was racking up the rounds. I think I gave 1 round to Carlos Takam. And this fight also shows you, because it was quite a wide margin on the scorecards in the end, shows you that the fight, it can be very competitive like this. But one guy, he can still be winning almost every single round. So not only did Joshua have to overcome an opponent he was facing at short notice, he also had to deal with an injury in the ring. Not something he would have been familiar with. I mean, clearly it troubled him for a round or so before he was able to adjust, and then he fought on with it. So in the experience box, it's a big tick, and he will be better for coming through the situation, coming through the adversity. And this win is definitely the second best of Joshua's career. And Takam's performance, it proved he was no joke. He was a legitimate contender, and he gave Anthony Joshua some trouble at times. I guess there will be the inevitable comparisons with Takam and Parker having fought. Some will draw them. But for me, I mean, I think the only real parallel I can draw, because it's not a like-for-like situation. I mean, I think the comparison I would draw is that Joshua clearly has more one-punch power than Parker. But we already knew that. I would say I still have some questions over Joshua's gas tank. And for me, he did visibly slow down in those later rounds. Is he too heavy at 254 pounds? I still think that's an open question. But in fairness, I do think he was holding a little back, and he was trying to conserve himself at times. I mean, there's no way he would have wanted a repeat of the Vlad fight. And when push came to shove, he showed the ref enough for the ref to stop the fight. So it was a very good victory, and a character-building one. He's now 20-0, and he deserves to be so. So after the fight, he said he wants all the belts. He wants just the big fights. So Eddie Hearn, Joshua's promoter, he also said he will give the fans the big fights. But they probably won't be going abroad. I think the stumbling block for Hearn to deliver on the fights, though, in a timely fashion, it will be the money side of the equation. With Joseph Parker's team saying they won't be lowballed, they won't take a 20% cut of the purse. Deontay Wilder, he will want his fair share of the pie as well. But he has been repeatedly saying he wants to make that fight next. So maybe they will be able to come to an agreement, quite quickly. He obviously has to get past Berminster Fern first. I am optimistic we'll eventually see these fights. But whether we see 2 unification fights in 2018, well, I'm not so sure. These things often take longer than we expect. We actually thought we'd have one this year. Okay, Dillian Whyte and Robert Helenius. Not a good fight. Helenius peaked in round 2 when he rocked Whyte, and from there it was all downhill. Helenius, he looked gassed from about round 3, and he largely put away his offensive arsenal, and he opted for a survival mode sort of thing. I mean, he just really put away his punches and was just trying to survive. He lived on the ropes. He wasn't doing much at all. He was very negative. Dillian Whyte, he looked okay, but while he was pressuring Helenius and getting away some of his work pretty easily, there was nothing particularly memorable about it. He didn't look like a world-level fighter based on this performance. He was unable to really hurt Helenius, and it felt the fight kind of went into this autopilot mode for several rounds. It was happening, but there wasn't really much of note happening. Even in the final couple of rounds, either men didn't offer much in the way of entertainment. I mean, sure, White was game and willing, but yeah, it wasn't a great fight. I guess in fairness to White though, Helenius, he was acting more like a sparring partner. He was doing his best impression of how Razvan Kajanu fought against Joseph Parker in May. And when someone does that, it is hard to look great when someone is that negative. But it would have been good to see more precision from White. And he was often flailing away at times, and some of his footwork didn't look that great. But based on that fight, Deontay Wilder, he should not be overly concerned about the threat that Dillian Whyte poses to him. But hey, I guess styles make fights, and this one ended up being a stinker because Helenius went into his shell. In terms of Helenius, well, he likely is now considered some sort of high-level gatekeeper of sorts. It's very disappointing, what he showed tonight. He showed so little of what he can do. But I guess importantly for White, he won, he moves on, and maybe the nature of this performance, maybe it's enough to convince Wilder that it's worth taking the lucrative offer that has been put in front of him to fight Dillian Whyte. We'll have to see. Am I being unfair to Dillian Whyte here? Or do you agree with me that he looked a little bit average out there tonight? I mean, certainly he was in much better shape than I've seen him before, and he had a good gas tank. He didn't gas out. But he was a bit sloppy in the footwork. Well, it needs some work. What do you make of it all? What did you make of the AJ win? Did you think the stoppage was a little premature? Let me know. Drop a comment, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. That's boxing_squared. I'm out.